The most isolated place on Earth is a graveyard, and something down there is still adding to the body count. No ship crosses this stretch of ocean by accident. No human has ever lived here. The closest people to Point Nemo at any given moment aren't on land, they're astronauts drifting overhead in the International Space Station. It is, by every measurable standard, the most unreachable point on the planet. And yet, bodies keep arriving, wreckage keeps accumulating, and the closer researchers look at what happens inside that circle of water, the harder it becomes to call it anything other than a killing ground the planet has chosen for itself. This is what the coordinates hide. The location was calculated in 1992 by a Croatian-Canadian survey engineer using computational geometry. The problem was simple. Find the point in the world's oceans furthest from any land in every direction. The answer was almost cruelly precise. A single spot in the South Pacific, equidistant from 3 tiny fragments of coastline. Ducie Island in the Pitcairn Group to the north. Motu Nui, a rocky sentinel off Easter Island to the northeast. Maher Island, off the coast of Antarctica to the south, each one more than 2,688 kilometers away. The circle of ocean enclosed by those 3 points contains an area larger than the former Soviet Union. Inside that circle there is nothing. No island, no reef, no anchored buoy, no shipping lane, no fishing fleet, no cable route, no inhabited coastline within a distance greater than the width of most continents. If a person stood at Point Nemo and looked in every direction, they would see the same curved horizon of gray water, repeated 360 times, and beyond that horizon, for over 1,000 nautical miles in every direction, they would find only more water. And yet the maps of the modern world are covered in traces of what has been lost there. To understand why Point Nemo keeps killing people, the geography has to come first, because the geography is the weapon. The zone sits within what oceanographers call the South Pacific Gyre, a slow, vast, clockwise rotation of water that has been turning for as long as the continents have held their present shape. The gyre pulls surface currents inward toward its center and then holds them there. Nothing that enters easily leaves. Nutrients cannot reach the surface. Sunlight penetrates through water so clear it belongs to another world and finds nothing to illuminate. Biologists have described the region as the least biologically productive stretch of ocean on Earth, a desert in the sea, a place where the water is alive with almost no life at all. The depth beneath the surface is close to 4,000 meters, cold, black, undisturbed. The seabed at Point Nemo is one of the loneliest surfaces on the planet. Further from a human settlement than most craters on the near side of the moon are from the equipment humanity has left there. And it is into this seabed, this desert, this rotating cell of empty water, that the world has been aiming its most dangerous debris for more than 50 years. The space agencies have a name for it. They call it the Spacecraft Cemetery. Since the late 1970s, more than 260 spacecraft have been guided down through the atmosphere on trajectories calculated to end inside the Point Nemo circle. Cargo vessels from Russia, Japan, and Europe, fuel tanks, satellites at the end of their working lives, modules from decommissioned space stations, entire orbital laboratories the size of buses. The largest of them was the Russian station, Mir. 120 tons of metal, glass, wiring, and instruments burning through the upper atmosphere in 2001, disintegrating into fragments the size of cars, striking the ocean's surface at speeds that would liquefy anything in their path. Somewhere below the surface of Point Nemo, the wreckage of Mir is still resting on that cold seabed, along with the shattered bones of hundreds of other machines humanity chose to bury in the one place it hoped no witness would ever be. That was the calculation. No witnesses, no casualties. Aim the falling giants at the emptiest coordinate on the map and let the ocean close over them. But the ocean has not closed over them cleanly. Because Point Nemo is not empty. It has never been empty. The first hint of that arrived in the summer of 1997, and it did not come from a ship. It came from a hydrophone. The United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had been operating a network of underwater listening stations across the Pacific, originally built during the Cold War to track submarines. In July of that year, the system recorded something none of the technicians could explain. A single sound, enormous, rising and falling in frequency across roughly 1 minute, loud enough to be detected by sensors more than 5,000 kilometers apart. They called it the bloop, the point of origin, when the acoustic engineers triangulated the arrays, sat almost exactly inside the Point Nemo circle, a few hundred kilometers off from the mathematical center, but well within the pole of inaccessibility. The sound had the acoustic signature of a living thing, a biological source, something that vocalized in a range that suggested vast size, larger, by some estimates, than the largest whale ever measured. And yet no whale species known to science produces a sound of that amplitude, and no creature large enough to produce it has ever been observed anywhere on Earth. Years later, oceanographers offered a revised explanation. The bloop, they said, was most likely an icequake, the fracturing of an enormous piece of Antarctic ice as it broke and drifted north. The consensus settled. The file was closed, and yet the bloop was only the first. Between the late 1990s and the mid-2000s, the same hydrophone arrays recorded a series of anomalous sounds originating from the same broad region. Sounds nicknamed Julia, slow down, upsweep, whistle, each one strange in its own way. Each one attributed, eventually, to ice, or to volcanic activity, or to the movement of magma beneath the seabed. Each one closed. The consensus is probably correct. The scientific explanations are probably right. But something else is also true. The sounds keep coming, and the sounds are the least of what Point Nemo has been doing. Return to the surface. Return to the water. There is a category of maritime incident that appears in insurance records, in Coast Guard filings, in fragmentary reports from the merchant marine, and in the recovered logs of small vessels that survived what they encountered. The category is loosely defined. Investigators tend to call it South Pacific attrition. It refers to the disappearance of small craft, private yachts, research vessels, and long-distance racers in the waters around and adjacent to the pole of inaccessibility. Most disappearances at sea can be explained: weather, mechanical failure, human error, piracy, rogue waves. But the incidents around Point Nemo share a pattern that has troubled investigators for decades. The vessels vanish in fair weather. They vanish without distress signals. They vanish after their last logged position placed them squarely inside the region where no rescue can arrive in time. The nearest permanently crewed station capable of responding to a maritime emergency in the pole of inaccessibility is not a Coast Guard base. It is not a fishing port. It is the International Space Station, orbiting roughly 400 kilometers overhead. Any ship that runs into trouble within the Point Nemo circle is, by definition, closer to astronauts than to any other human being on Earth, and astronauts cannot descend to help. That is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a documented feature of every risk assessment produced for expeditions crossing the region. Solo sailors attempting the Great Southern Circumnavigations have been briefed for decades that if their vessel fails inside the circle, no one is coming. There is no plan. There is no protocol. There is only the water. And the water has taken more of them than the public record easily reveals. Consider what the geography does to a body. A person who falls into the water at Point Nemo, wearing survival gear, in fair conditions, has a theoretical survival window measured in hours. Even in summer, the surface temperature hovers close to freezing. The wind acceleration across an unbroken fetch of thousands of kilometers builds seas that can lift a small vessel and drop it into a trough deep enough to hide it from any horizon-scanning aircraft. The nearest search and rescue aircraft, with the range to reach the coordinates and return, would depart from Chile or New Zealand at flight distances that consume the survival window before the aircraft has arrived. In practical terms, to fall into the water inside the pole of inaccessibility is to have already died. The body will be found only if the vessel is found, and the vessel will be found only if it drifts far enough in the right direction for years before someone happens to see it. Most of them do not drift out. The gyre holds them. This is the first mechanism of the killing. The place is a trap that was set by the ocean itself before humans knew it was there, and it goes on being set every second, without maintenance, without intent, and without mercy. The second mechanism is stranger, and it is the one the space agencies do not like to discuss in detail. Because when a spacecraft is deorbited toward Point Nemo, the calculations assume the debris will strike the ocean's surface, sink to the seabed, and remain there. Cold, quiet, forgotten. That is the plan. That is the reason for choosing the coordinate in the first place. But not every piece of every spacecraft sinks. Some pieces are designed with pressure vessels. Some pieces are wrapped in insulation. Some pieces contain sealed voids that survive atmospheric re-entry intact. And those pieces, when they hit the water, do not descend. They float. They enter the gyre. They begin to circulate. Fragments of orbital hardware, propellant tanks, thermal shielding, and unidentified metallic debris have been reported by the crews of vessels crossing adjacent waters. Photographs exist. Recovery of specific pieces has, on occasion, been attempted. But the region is so vast, and the incidents so scattered, and the reporting so inconsistent that no comprehensive inventory of surface debris inside the Point Nemo circle has ever been produced. What is drifting there? No one knows. What has struck what? No one knows. Whether a small vessel that vanished in the region in the last 30 years might have struck a piece of orbital debris on the surface, at speed, in the dark, with no chance of a distress call, no one knows. The mechanism is not proven. The correlation is not established. But the possibility is documented, and it has been documented in internal risk assessments produced by more than one national space agency. And it is one of the reasons the coordinate is chosen with such precision every time a new mass is dropped through the atmosphere. Point Nemo is a cemetery that will not stay closed. There is a third mechanism, and this one belongs to deeper time. The South Pacific Gyre, because it accumulates and does not release, has been collecting more than spacecraft. It has been collecting plastic, not in the quantities of the more famous North Pacific garbage patch. Because there is so little coastline draining into the South Pacific, the concentration is lower. But the plastic is there, and it circulates, and it does not decompose in any meaningful sense on any timescale the human species recognizes. The gyre also collects biological material. Dead cetaceans that die anywhere in the surrounding thousands of kilometers of ocean can, over years, be carried by currents into the pole of inaccessibility. The seabed beneath Point Nemo has been described, by the small number of expeditions that have sampled it, as a graveyard of whale falls. Skeletons of enormous mammals resting on that dark floor, undisturbed by scavenging populations, because the region is too empty to support them. Above the surface, silence. Below the surface, accumulation. A slow, cold gathering of everything the ocean has decided to keep. And this is what the geography is, in the end. Not a coordinate, not an anecdote, a machine. A rotating cell that pulls in and does not release, that has been operating for millions of years, that has been used by the modern world as a disposal site precisely because of that quality. And that has begun, in the last half-century, to be filled with objects and possibilities that were never present in it before. The killing continues. Because the machine continues. The private sailors continue to attempt the great southern routes. The research vessels continue to sample the water. The space agencies continue to schedule re-entries into the coordinate. Every one of those choices depends on the assumption that the pole of inaccessibility is a manageable emptiness, that it is a place where nothing significant is happening, that whatever is dropped into it can be considered final. None of those assumptions are entirely secure. In the last decades, oceanographers studying the region have documented shifts that were not predicted. The gyre's boundaries are moving. The surface temperatures are climbing. The stratification of the water column, which has held the deep and the shallow apart for millennia, is thinning at rates that were not modeled. What happens when a 2,000-meter deep column of stratified water begins to overturn is not a question that has an answer yet. What happens to the accumulated debris on the seabed if the gyre releases is also not a question that has an answer. Somewhere below Point Nemo, in cold and dark, the wreckage of more than 260 spacecraft is resting. Fuel systems that were designed to be inert, but were not designed to be permanent. Metals that will eventually corrode. Composite materials whose long-term behavior in high-pressure saltwater has never been observed on the timescale for which they will now be observed. Nuclear power sources from at least some of the deorbited hardware, sealed in casings that were designed to survive re-entry, but were not designed to survive centuries of submersion. The engineers who chose the coordinate believed they were making a decision that would last as long as it needed to. They chose the emptiest place they could find. They aimed the falling giants at it. They watched the plumes of water rise and fall. They marked the trajectory as successful. And they went home. The ocean did not go home. The gyre kept turning. The bodies kept arriving. Not just the bodies of sailors, though those arrived too. And not just the bodies of whales, though those arrived too. But the bodies of everything the modern world has chosen to hide inside its emptiest coordinate. Every year, the number grows. Every year, the density of the cemetery increases. Every year, the boundary between what is submerged and what is drifting becomes harder to trace. And every year, the same question returns. Why is Point Nemo still killing people? The answer is not one thing. It is a stack of mechanisms operating together. The distance from rescue, the temperature of the water, the scale of the fetch and the height of the seas, the debris on the surface that has never been inventoried, the debris on the seabed that has never been mapped, the gyre that traps and does not release, the isolation that turns any small failure into a terminal one. And beneath all of those, a stranger mechanism. Not a mechanism of physics, a mechanism of choice. Humanity has decided for more than 50 years that this coordinate is where the dangerous things are sent. Every one of those decisions has increased the density of the killing ground. Every one of those decisions has been made on the assumption that the ground would remain inert. Every one of those decisions is a bet that the ocean will not, at some point, refuse to hold what it has been given. The bet has not yet been lost, but the bet has not yet been closed either. Somewhere in the South Pacific, right now, at 48 degrees, 52 minutes south, and 123 degrees, 23 minutes west, the surface of the water is moving in the same slow rotation it has always moved in. The wind is unbroken. The horizon is empty. The nearest human beings are overhead, in orbit, looking down at a patch of ocean that appears indistinguishable from any other. Below them, the machine continues. Below the machine, the cemetery continues. Below the cemetery, something that once made a sound loud enough to travel 5,000 kilometers through the water may or may not still be there. The consensus says ice. The consensus is probably right. And still, every few years, the hydrophones record another anomaly, and the file is opened, and the file is closed, and the ocean says nothing further about what it is holding. The sailors will keep attempting the crossing. The agencies will keep aiming the falling giants. The gyre will keep turning. And the answer to why the pole of inaccessibility keeps killing will keep unfolding, one incident at a time, in a place where no witness has ever been permitted to remain long enough to describe what was seen. There is a place on this planet where no human has ever lived. There is a place where the maps end. There is a place where the ocean has been chosen again and again to hold what humanity is finished with. The coordinates are known. Everything else is still unknown. Don't miss the next video either. It's just as fascinating, and it's waiting for you right now.